morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. We're happy to have you here. This is truly a worldwide event. We had over 700 people sign up. We're very excited about that. And same with our panelists worldwide. We have representing Israel, Ireland, UK, and little old me from the US. As was mentioned, I'm Heidi Arsenault, and I head up our alliances. And today's a very special day for us because we're announcing our relationship with Google. We are now a Google ISV. We were one of a few chosen, and we're very excited about that and looking forward to Tony, one of our acclaimed speakers here, who's going to talk more about the multi-cloud environment and how we work together on that. I think the other part I wanted to mention is we have three great speakers. Jamin is our superstar here. He's our vice president of our architecture and customer experience, and he'll be moderating this event. But our two main speakers are Orit, and she is Orit Sigal-Vadai, who's our Chief Information Officer right here at CyberProof. And she brings a wealth of information. She comes from a number of global companies as well as multi-kind of environments. So she brings a wealth of information. And we have Tony, oops, wrong way, Tony Richards, who is here. He's headed up the UK G Cloud. He's an active member in many associations, and he was voted on the top 100 list of digital security leaders. So we're really looking forward to his thought leadership as it relates to the topic at hand. So today, as we talked about, it's going to be navigating multi-cloud environments and doing that in thinking about costs and your data, knowing there's like a tax between multi-clouds. There can be a data tax. So we'll address some of these issues during our session. We would like to make this very interactive. We want to be able to have questions. We're going to do some polling throughout just to make sure that we're addressing the topics that you think are most important. There was a survey that was done that was of 100 CISOs, and they came back and said 80% are in a multi-cloud environment. And so, but what we'd like to know is, of our audience, what percentage of you are in a multi-cloud environment? So without further ado, we're going to do a poll, and then I'm going to pass it over to Jamin, who's going to be your moderator today. So I want to thank everyone again for having me here, and take it away. There's our poll. Okay, let's see. How many cloud providers does your organization work with? Na, 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 na. Right. My own special, show tune for you.
Heidi, also you can call out the question too, because it's displaying at the same time. So let's get everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Howard. So what are the clouds related challenges that your organization is facing most? Increasing costs, management of the cloud environments, navigating security and policy in the cloud. Good one, good one. Threat visibility or skill shortages. Personally, my understanding is it's D, all of the above, but we're looking forward to hearing what the poll says from our audience. I'll give you just another minute, and Howard will show us the results. Okay, drum roll, please. Are you ready? Bam. Okay, well, interesting. Tony, what do you think of this? 37% say more than 3. Of course, he was thinking there was only 1, and we know which one you were thinking it was. But,
well, it's to be honest, it's kind of pretty much what I expected.
Excellent. And Orit, yourself, I mean, you see 2 or more is kind of popular, but 3, of course, you run an environment. So is this pretty consistent with what you see within your own environment? You're on mute, but it sounds riveting.
Sorry for that. It is consistent, and it's not so surprising to see that only 3% are not on the cloud at all. But this is the way most organizations are heading now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Jamin, of course, you work with many large enterprise customers, so you're seeing a ton of environments, one to many. What's your take on this poll and what you're seeing here? pretty consistent?
Yeah, indeed. And maybe, so first of all, welcome again to the session. And I'm super excited to have Orit and Tony to provide us this thought leadership on multi-cloud strategies. Heidi, it's very evident and it's justified in the poll results that, although organizations may have a preferred cloud vendor to host most of their workload, but they also have to rely on more than one cloud vendor. In this case, more than three. This is very clear here to support their business needs. And this approach, I think, is enabling organizations to be much better when it comes to scaling and also expand in line with the business needs and priorities. And most importantly, how it can help to manage their operational cost.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because when you look at it, 29% of these folks said increasing cost of cloud computing was like really what they're most concerned about. And, there is the data tax and some other things that are involved with that. But why don't you go ahead and speak to that, and then I'll let you work with your panel. I'll be back when it's time for Q&A.
Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah, so thanks Heidi. And maybe, what I want to do is, before we go into the details, maybe I just wanted to kind of start with some cloud jargons that sometimes is very confusing. So we kind of keep saying, what does it mean a hybrid cloud, or how does a multi-cloud differ from a poly-cloud, for example? So before we look into that, multi-cloud approaches in the current security landscape and the importance of a robust multi-cloud strategy, I want to see how many of us have that understanding of poly-cloud. And poly-cloud is actually a newer approach and a new industry term. Fundamentally, it's defined due to the increased adoption of serverless computing, function as a service, operating model, which I'm sure probably many of us have heard of. And both serverless computing and function as a service, or FaaS, as we call it, drives the development of more cloud-native applications. And in the case of a multi-cloud environment, it just simply means, as we all know, it's just using more than one cloud provider to host your applications and services. But in the case of a poly-cloud approach, it's basically a methodology that encourages cloud specialization. So what it means is that cloud vendors, when they start implementing newer capabilities, they favor specific features beyond the standard things that you'd expect, like compute, storage, networking and stuff. They actually use some of the advantages, or the capabilities that they have to their own advantage. So, for example, if you're looking at a large and complex application, these can really leverage some of these specialized feature of a specific cloud vendor to run much more effectively in that cloud environment, in a distributed or multi-cloud environment. So, as an example, this could mean that an organization can use Google to run security or drive analytics overall. AWS could be used to run backend systems and databases, and Azure, for example, could be used to run front-end applications and user management, for example. So, so before we go into the details, maybe so Orit, let me just ask you, so why have multi-cloud and poly-cloud strategies become so important in today's digital landscape?
So I can think of several factors. I think the main motivation, the first one will be flexibility. The ability to deploy, the best features, as you just, mentioned, from each provider. It offered the CIO to select, different cloud services and features from different providers and find the optimal service according to the business needs. It can reduce the risk by having high availability to avoid a vendor lock-in into a single cloud provider if something happens, and then reduce the potential risk of relying on a single providers. I can also think about, scaling up. Organization can select the most cost-effective and efficient cloud service for a particular workload or geographic region, leading to improved cost optimization and performance. And I think, finally, there are also business motivators like customer preference. There are cases where there is customer demand for using one provider versus another, and there's
Like
need
maybe
to
Google.
be flexibility. Sorry, Heidi?
Oh, no, sorry. Sorry. Color commentary over here. I see Tony's nodding his head. So I'm like, yeah, like Google, because I know that there's certain features that people really like. And sorry about that.
No, good. And it can be both ways. Certain, features that you prefer in a certain provider, or the other way around. In my previous company, we had an AI solution for the retail industry, and some of the customers, prefer not to have the data with a vendor that they consider to be their competitor. So there are various reasons why, and sometimes we get those demands from our customers and we need to adjust it. So once you prepare in advance your polycloud or multi-cloud environments, it helps you to be more flexible to your customer demands.
Yeah, and I think, Orit, one of the points that you mentioned is also tied into the skill set of people, isn't it? Especially when specific organizations decide to tend to lean towards a specific cloud. I believe it's also based on the skills that they are comfortable with, isn't it? So yeah. And maybe Tony, what are your thoughts about defining a security strategy in a multi-cloud environment, and solutions like Chronicle security fit into that multi-cloud environment strategy? So what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, I'd say I think a lot more organizations probably use more cloud vendors than they think they do. And this is why you really need to have a strategy around use of cloud. So you think about all the SaaS products, so Salesforce, ServiceNow, various HR SaaS products and services and accountancy services. So when people are saying, oh yeah, we use 2, maybe 3, whatever cloud providers, everyone immediately jumps to, well, it must be the IaaS and PaaS platforms. But then when you factor in all the others, that's actually probably a lot more. So at Google, we're actually big fans of multi-cloud or polycloud, as you put it. You might think that's why is Google not want everyone to be on Google? No, we actually believe in a polycloud strategy. And to that end, we have a number of different products and services that actually work across different cloud platforms, from Anthos, from managing your clouds to, like you said, Chronicle, which can be used as a SIEM, and the attached SOAR programs that we've got now with Chronicle operations that can pull feeds from all the different cloud providers and on-prem and wherever you may have it, to be perfectly honest. So we constantly opening up or developing our products and services to work with multi or poly cloud services. But this is why you need to have that strategy, because what happens if you start throwing everything into the cloud, even with whether it's multi-cloud, polycloud, etc. You need to have a strategy about why you're going to certain clouds, what you're doing there, understand the security aspects of those different, whether it's a SaaS product or service, or whether it's IaaS, infrastructure in the cloud. You need to have a strategy about how you're doing it and where you're doing it. Otherwise, things will run away. And if things start running away, you can't get a handle on security.
Yeah, and maybe also on that point. So, or just if you just look at from a cost point of view, so it's kind of clearly evident that if you go into that multi-cloud approach, organizations can achieve cost savings, from various scenarios. So what are your thoughts on some of the ways that you would achieve that cost savings in a multi-cloud environment?
So I see that in two directions. On one hand, it can be great to have a multi-cloud environment, and you can cut costs when comparing the vendors and utilizing the best compute for the best provider. So when you select what you prefer to do with each vendor and optimize it, you can cut costs dramatically. On the other hand, it can be a challenge when you need to manage the cost for multi-providers, get the billing information from various vendors. So it can be both ways.
Yeah, and maybe if you move into the challenges as well, so it's kind of related. So the poll really showed pretty much most of the common things that we see, and it's quite difficult to kind of differentiate from one to the other. So Tony, can you shed some light on, from your experiences and the CISO point of view, some of the common challenges that you see in a multi-cloud environment, specifically around that security kind of angle?
Yeah, so some of the challenges, as explained, is getting that single pane. If you've got all those, several different platforms or several different providers, it's pulling together, whether that's, logs and alerts from your SIEMs, or whether that's, the compliance requirements. There's a lot of different moving parts you have to be cognizant of and keep an eye on, especially if you've got disparate parts of the business. If you've got different divisions, if you're a large enterprise, they may be running into different parts of the cloud at different speeds, and it's quite a hegemony there to keep track of. And that's really, why you have to sort of I wouldn't always say centralize, but certainly start having those sort of, views into the different areas about what they're using, what they want to use it, why they're using it. Maybe even set guardrails, so don't stop them using different cloud services, but maybe set guardrails about the quality of the cloud service, the compliance of the cloud services they can use. So give them choice, but put a box around it. And without doing that, you can end up with all sorts of shadow IT and things going on. On top of that, the other aspects is, it's really, if you're just looking to lift and shift legacy applications and services, there's a good chance you're probably not going to save money necessarily moving to the cloud, because all the extra bits you have to put around it, around security and tracking, etc. But you should take the opportunity, if you're going to move to cloud, to either refactor or rethink what those systems and services are doing. Take the opportunity to actually re-engineer, re-architect for more, better security, better processes, take into account the latest API and technologies out there, rather than just lifting an on-prem architecture and service and trying to put it into the cloud.
Yeah. And I think, so also one of the things that I've also seen, especially when talking to, the CISOs and all, is that we adopt more into that serverless computing, like I mentioned before, the function as a service kind of model. It becomes really difficult to start getting that visibility into what's actually going in the cloud, because how do you monitor a serverless instance, or how do you monitor a function? API monitoring becomes challenging. So to understand cyber threats in that context, the approach should be different. You need to be really looking at how you will be first of all bringing the data in order to run the analytics, and then how do you look at the right threats, isn't it? Because the threat that you would see in a virtual machine type, or a cloud hosted application is different to a completely cloud native kind of scenario. So that's again something that I've seen, especially from a security point of view. A lot of CISOs have challenge in really understanding how to navigate through that.
Yeah,
yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, I echo that as well. I mean, certainly at Google, we threat model everything, before we do it, during, and continuous. It's one of the things that we do. And we advise everybody to do that, no matter whether it's, like you say, whether it's step functions or, a lift and shift or cloud migration, threat model everything, because then you can make sure you can get the security right.
Indeed, and so CyberProof from our side, we have developed what we call a use case factory methodology, and this is exactly how we kind of look at from a threat-centric point of view as well. So we look at what are the typical threats that you would actually see in an application, and then start looking at how do you then start identifying the telemetry that would need in order to help with that proactive threat detection. And not only just detecting the threat, how do you then respond to that? So if you see some security challenges in an API communication, how exactly can you manage that? So that response and remediation should also be taken into consideration as you start looking at that threat detection part of that as well. So maybe Orit, from a CIO point of view, how do you see some of the challenges in that multi-cloud environment?
So I think there are a few things that sometimes can seem overwhelming, but from my experience, it can be complex, especially if you're talking about operational complexity. You need to manage, each provider has its own management interface, like managing application deployment. Jason and Sagi mentioned in the previous session about monitoring. So monitor, a few providers versus, just one is more complex. The governance across diverse cloud services, optimization of resources, allocating them, across different vendors. Those are the things that can become very complicated. Also, you can think about the integration between the different cloud providers, the effort that you need to invest, data consistency, between cloud, they may require either development or API integrations. We previously talked about optimizing the cost, which is more complex, and I think, Jamin, you mentioned previously the skill set. When working on a multiple cloud environment, you need to require a very diverse skill set of expertise. So you either need to invest in training or get hired more, specialists with different skills. So there are a lot of aspects from a management point of view that add complexity to that. So you need to consider, the advantages versus the challenges and set the right strategy for whatever will fit the best for your organization.
Well, interestingly enough, that kind of brings us to a question that we had on the Q&A. One of the questions here was, my organization is considering bringing on a new service provider. What should we be looking out for when it comes to our cloud security? How about you, Tony?
Well, you know what? It's have dialogue. Start with talking to the different providers that you're interested in. Make sure they work with the services and the cloud structures and the cloud technologies that you're using. That's pretty important. Look at the pedigrees that they've got. Talk to their engineering staff, especially in the security space. How they're doing things. If you're wanting them to act as an MSSP, do they look into the things that you want looked into? Is there a simple process to onboard? Is there a simple process for alerting, and how do they dovetail into your security structures? And really, look at how those organizations will partner with you. That's what you're looking for, as a security partner.
Yeah, and maybe if I also just add a couple more points to that, Tony. I think most of the time what you'll see is that there is really capable technologies and tools out there. So you look at Google Chronicle to all the other major solutions out there. So they are actually built to satisfy a large volume of different clientele. Yeah. So the provider should be able to leverage those tools, but most importantly, to personalize that tool in a way that it works for the client. Okay, so this is where I think many a times we say, if you start looking at those kind of providers, you will see that there is not a lot of those providers who can, take that, the solution that is built or the technology that is built and heavily or customize that to meet the requirements for the customer. Whether that could be, increasing the visibility through bringing in some data sources by customizing the way that you're ingesting it. You can call it data pre-processing, or bringing in technology that is probably not natively supported by these tools. To how do you drive some of these response automations and stuff to provide that right visibility back into the end-to-end security operations process. The other point that I also have seen is many times when organizations are looking for a cloud or a security provider, they will probably in the process of transition and transformation. So they will be mostly having a legacy technology that they wanted to move to a more of a cloud native solution, to future-proof their architectures and what have you. So how can the organization be assisted by the provider in driving that transition in a seamless manner without really impacting their existing operations? So and at the same time, maintaining some of the investments that they probably have already made, in terms of certain technologies. So for me, I think those two things are really important, when you are looking at bringing a provider to help them through that process end to end.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is also think about where you're going in the future, what your future capacity, what your future technologies, and the things that you want, do some serious horizon scanning about what you want to do, and then make sure that your security partner has the capabilities, or has at least talk to them about their future projections, where they're going with technology and etc., to make sure that you align.
Yeah, indeed. So just moving on from that. So as organizations move into the multi-cloud environments and starting to develop a robust security strategy, what are some of the recommended practices that you would advise? Maybe Orit, what are your thoughts on some best practices for developing a robust multi-cloud or poly-cloud strategy?
So I think, my recommendation will be to try and build the strategy at the beginning. Preferably, you talked about transforming from on-prem to your first cloud, or if it's a new startup, that choosing the first vendor, because this will allow to scale up smartly. In case you do have already, one cloud provider and you're moving into a multi-cloud, it can be more complex. So ultimately, the choice of cloud provider should align with your specific business requirements. You need to include factors like application needs, existing technology stack, geographic reach, budget, compliance. We talked about, I think it was in the last previous session as well, GDPR in Europe. So there are things that you need to take into account. And also, I think one of the most important thing is that this is a huge decision for an organization. And this is something that should be made by the executive team. You need the entire C-suite executive to be involved. It has a major impact on your business. So you need the CEO, you need the CIO, from IT and infrastructure point of view. You need the CISO from security. You need the CTO for the product and technology that is usually on the cloud, the CRO for all the client communication and client point of view, because it has a lot of impact on our customer at the end, and the CFO, because again, it's one of the huge costs for organizations. So it really is something that you need everyone to be in the same room and decide on it together. And just make sure, again, when you're coming with this strategy, that you need to have a very clear objective and criteria for selecting your cloud providers. and choose the right mix between the cloud providers. I think those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, thanks. And Tony, is there anything for you to add?
Yeah, I'd add to that. Whether you're an enterprise, major enterprise, or a startup, actually, to be honest, startups have it easier. You can actually go straight in cloud everything. You put all the different systems in there. Go cloud native because you're starting from scratch. Major enterprises are a lot slower, a lot more complex. But always, whether you're a major enterprise or just a startup, have a strategy about what you're doing with cloud, where you're going to go, what you want to do, what you want it for, get the right service for what you want it to do, and then have a strategy about how you're going to tie those together when it comes to everything from billing to security to governance, etc. And then, identify how you're then also going to sort of push security onto those cloud providers, because they're your suppliers. What are you looking for? What sort of security requirements, what sort of certification requirements, what sort of regulatory requirements, depending on what you need. So all of that, you need to have a cloud strategy, whether you're a startup or an enterprise.
Yeah, and I think, so when we talked last time, you also mentioned skills. Yeah, so, and you touched on certifications, isn't it? Because that's key, because without that right skills and the right enablement, so as organizations are defining that, you also need to be looking at from a resource point of view, a skills point of view, how do you enable the existing teams? Either you enable the internal teams, or you need to look into how you can actually source some of these skills externally through a capable service provider, isn't it?
Absolutely. At Google, we see a lot of incidents and things like that. Not on our stuff. Well, not of our creation. Let's put it that way. It's different. But when we see threats and issues out there, over 60% of cloud breaches or vulnerable issues that are out there that people have is down to misconfiguration. So you've got to have the skill sets for the cloud things you're using. Otherwise, stuff will get configured incorrectly, or people will use shortcuts to get somewhere because they've got to push a feature or whatever. So you've got to have those skills. I mean, don't get us wrong. Us at Google, and I'm sure the other cloud providers are doing similar things. We have programs to try and make our products and services as secure as possible from default. We have so certainly at Google, we have an active program called Security by Default, where we're looking at all our different products and services and trying to make sure that all the security elements are turned on by default, so that when somebody fires something up or starts something or spins up a new service, it's secured as far as possible at the start. And if you want to make it more relaxed on security, then you have to actively do that yourselves. The idea being is that, when organizations, especially, going into cloud or trying a new service, they're not going to suddenly leave themselves open due to misconfigurations from the start. Now, like I said, skill sets is definitely something that people need to look at, and especially when as part of that, like I said, that sort of cloud strategy includes skills, making sure people have got the right skills.
Yeah, and I think one other point, and maybe Orit, you probably have similar experience as well, isn't it? Misconfigurations and stuff, from a CIO point of view, so you probably have seen quite a lot, in that. And I think in the end, it's all about ensuring that as an organization, having the right level of cloud security framework and that blueprint in terms of the configuration is key. Some of the large organizations that I work with have something called a cloud foundation kind of department itself that defines that configuration blueprint and defines that specific security and compliance policies and frameworks as well. So that kind of helps alleviate some of those challenges. But one other point I also want to add is, as we kind of start looking into moving to the cloud, you will also start seeing a lot of data being generated, isn't it? So how do you handle that data? And this is where also solutions like a data lake is super important. And of course, in an optimized, cost-optimized manner, because the data is actually giving a lot of value when it comes to our ability to proactively look at threats. You can run hunting, you can actually use that data to do visualizations and stuff. So it's all about, how you also, as part of your strategy, look at managing this data and first of all, collecting the data, the right data, manage that data, and then retain that for the needs. And so just moving on that, and as I said about data, so one of the buzzwords in the industry now is Gen AI. Yeah, so everything is AI and machine learning. So what do you think AI ML help with improving security in the multi-cloud environment, Tony?
So, I mean, obviously, we've been working in the AI space with DeepMind for a very long time. And this year we pushed a lot of those sort of, certainly what we call LLMs, that's the large language models, into our security features. So for example, we have a product where you can use the large language models connected to, say, VirusTotal, whereas before you could push a file into VirusTotal and it would tell you if it had a virus. Now you can push it in, the LLM will actually deconstruct that virus, tell you exactly what it's doing without it having to go into a sandbox or be, depth charged or anything like that. What would have taken a week of, reverse engineering now is done in a matter of a minute, because the AI will pull it apart, the virus apart, and tell you what the different bits are doing and where it's calling out to and all that sort of information. And on the other end, we've got, again, the AI that's been now integrated with Chronicle. So, you can start asking questions. So you can say to Chronicle, I want you to look at, using what we call sort of, conversational questioning. You can ask it, say, look at for this certain IOC in this time period, and then it will give you that information. Then you can ask follow-up questions in a conversational style. So this can really speed up, analysts' use of those SIEM services, but also reduces the sort of amount of complexity and training that analysts need. So it's lowering the bar slightly for analysts so that you don't have to have all these hyper-trained people. When, if we start moving the lever down a bit using the enhancements that IA can give us, then that sort of counteracts a little bit some of all the training that we have to also give on to people.
And to that point, and so we have actually developed some of these and leveraging AI and ML to run, for example, threat hunting. So what we are able to do is to leverage some of AI to write queries which are based on, so we can just basically write show me the list of all the executables that are downloaded last 24 hours, and then that can automatically convert into a specific query language based on the technology, that is YARA-L for Google, or KQL for Sentinel, or any other technology. And that is, again, like you said, it's simplifying the effort and using that dependency on highly skilled resources, and to a certain extent, it is also automating some of those findings by identifying suspicious activity. So it's enabling and making the overall threat detection and response much more efficient. And Orit, so from your point of view, what do you think? How does this machine learning and artificial intelligence revolutionizing the cloud operations, especially from a CIO point of view?
So I think there are things that they help a lot. If you're thinking about the cloud operation, area, there are things like backup, updates, security check. They can save a lot of time. They can reduce a lot of risk, a lot of human errors. So there are a lot of places that you can use that. You can do, anomaly detection to large amount of data. You talked about data and the data lakes. Once you have, a lot of data, it's something that you need to make sure you cover. There are tools that can help you analyze all kinds of usage partners, performance, data optimization, server optimization. So a lot of the day-to-day activities can be a lot improved with AI capabilities. It's just, the beginning. I think, we'll see a lot more in the future coming, but I think we can already see some added value to that.
Yeah, and maybe, and I know we are running out of time, so maybe quick, Tony, just one question. Please speak about some of the
Damon's breaking up a little bit. But yeah, in closing, we'd love to hear some thoughts about what you're thinking about over the next 10 years. And we'll just do a round robin and we'll close out with that.
Yeah, so the point was, yeah, so especially on Google security, so what are some of the advancements that you're making when it comes to AI and things like that?
So we've got all different areas that we're throwing it into, but largely in the security space, it's enhancing services to make it easier and quicker for users to use. I don't think we're going to get rid of analysts and security people just yet, certainly not in the next 10, 15, 20 years. But AI will certainly, the generative AI side will definitely enhance the services that they're doing, enhance the skill sets, and make doing these activities quicker and easier.
Yeah, so with that, I'll hand it over to you, Heidi, just to see if there is any questions.
Yeah, well, I think the final question really for us is a little bit about what, kind of if you looked into your crystal ball and you thought about what's going to happen like 10 years out, what does that look like? You kind of alluded to some of that, Tony, in terms of, what that means to your resources and how you can cut down on cost and time. But what else do you see in that crystal ball of yours?
Well, hopefully we'll see that percentage of organizations not using cloud move to the cloud in some way. And we'll see the organizations that moved to the cloud, started moving to the cloud 15 years ago, will be moving more into, step functions and really moving their way up the stack. But I think, we're going to just see efficiencies as more and more disruptors come to markets and others come to markets. We'll see efficiencies, we'll see speed, we'll see specialization, but I think it's still going to be pretty strong.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'd also like to say, I think it's really amazing how Google has taken to educating people on security. Like you offer, you see the ads on TV, you offer a lot of courses that people can start to actually get into the industry, and there are accredited classes that go towards people's certifications to keep up their, their certifications. So my hat's off to Google for doing that as well. Like, as we globally become more aware of cybersecurity at all levels, I think security starts top down, bottom up, right? So my hat's off to Google and the team for doing that. And with that, I think we'll probably close this session. And I want to thank my speakers and definitely Jamin, good job. And thank you for moderating. And we'll see you at the next session. Thank you.
Thank you.